in our salah, we need to remember Baitulmaqdis. A dua like this, Allahumma rzuqna salatan fil masjid al-Aqsa wa huwa hurrun aziz. Ya Allah, grant us a prayer in Al-Aqsa free from occupation. The Ummah is going to wake up, liberate Al-Aqsa, and Allah will give you a long life to see that and pray in it after it's liberated. With the month of Ramadan, we're reading the Quran. As you're reading the Quran, ponder over the geography of the Quran. Rasulullah every night would mention Al-Aqsa. Each person needs to find a niche. How can I serve this issue within my own field of expertise?
Baitulmaqdis, the sacred precinct in Palestine, is a blessed place in Islam. But today we have downplayed maybe its centrality to what it means to be a believer. From my last conversation with Dr Khalid El-Awaisi, where he controversially said that Al-Aqsa and the blessed land surrounding it have to be more clearly central to our lives and our faith and our worldview, I thought it would be interesting to really delve deeply into why Baitulmaqdis is so important to us and how do we practically manifest that in our lives. Dr Khalid El-Awaisi is from Hebron, Al-Khalil in Palestine. He's a lecturer of the pioneering field of Islamic Jerusalem studies. He's the Associate Professor of Islamic History at the Social Sciences University of Ankara. Dr Khalid El-Awaisi, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome back to The Thinking Muslim.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me on The Thinking Muslim again.
Jazakallah khair. Well, look, the conversation we last had brought out a lot of strands of follow-up conversation. So I want to explore this concept of Baitulmaqdis in particular in Islam. Let's just start from the very beginning, because I know you have 5 ways by which we can practically manifest the love for Baitulmaqdis. But before we get there, just bring us up to speed with what is Baitulmaqdis in Islamic terminology, how does it translate, and the reason why it's so important from an Islamic perspective.
Yes. Baitulmaqdis within the context of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he never used any other terminology to refer to this area as much as he used the name Baitulmaqdis. Okay. Baitulmaqdis is in reference to 3 different meanings. One is Al-Baytul Muqaddas, which is Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. And this is starting with the concept of Al-Bayt as a house of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the first house, Allah says in the Quran, in Surah Al-Imran, is the Kaaba. So, Inna awwala baytin wudi'a lin-nas. So the concept of Bayt in that narrow sense is a house of prayer. The second one, so in the sense of the Kaaba, and then for the second house on earth is Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, and we'll explore it in a little while. So Al-Baytul Muqaddas. The second one is the city, the holy city, which is Medina to Baitulmaqdis, and we have Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the night journey referring to the city as Baitulmaqdis. And the third one is the region, the Holy Land.
Okay.
And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam uses this as the land of raising and gathering. When he is asked about, tell us a fatwa about Baitulmaqdis, he says it's the land of raising and gathering. The Quranic terminology for this region is Al-Ardul Muqaddas in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 21. So what we see, Baitulmaqdis is an Islamic concept. But when we say an Islamic concept, many people narrow the concept of Islam to post-Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. But within the Quran, within Islamic history, Islam is the religion of all the prophets of Allah. So Moses was a Muslim, so was Jacob, so was Abraham, so was Adam alayhi salam. And I think this is, today Muslims have been narrowed down to what the Orientalists called Muhammadans. And this is what many non-Muslims see Islam to be, and what Muslims seem to have been framed within. And I think this is a very big problem that we need to rethink within the Islamic concept. Islam, within the Quranic concept, within the prophetic concept, Islam is the from the beginning, from Adam alayhi salam, and Muhammad is the last messenger of Islam. And the Quran talks about the disciples of Jesus as Muslims, Abraham as a Muslim. And this concept, I think a lot of non-Muslims have a problem with it. But within Islam, this is a very well-established idea. So going back to the concept of Baitulmaqdis, this is a land, in terms of terminology, we've delved into it, but this is a land that is holy, blessed. It is, most of the geography of the Quran is based around this particular land, as many scholars talk about. This is a land of the prophets, a land of hope, and it has many dimensions within the Islamic idea.
So set up geography, the parameters of the geography of Baitulmaqdis. Like, where does it start? Where does it end?
Yes. So within Islamic literature, the region of Baitulmaqdis extends beyond and different from what we call Palestine today. Palestine today is set by the British and French in the early 20th century. So today, Palestine and the map of Palestine that is flagged up everywhere is actually a colonialist map. And well before that, during the Roman period, there was 3 Palestines. But the Prophet ﷺ never used the term Palestine. He always used the term Baitulmaqdis. And the region of the Holy Land, or Baitulmaqdis, within Islam is different from the Christian Holy Land and the Jewish Promised Land. So these are completely 2 different concepts. Within Islam, it extends to parts of today, modern day Palestine, and parts of Jordan. So it includes all the way to, as Almaqdis says in his famous book, Ahsan al-Taqasim, the best of divisions. So he extends it, and this is based on many traditions from the early period, all the way to the area of Nablus and Jenin in the north, to Bi'r al-Saba in the south, to parts of today's Jordan, particularly Karak and Mu'ta, where the Sahaba came during the time of Rasulullah ﷺ, so this would include Hebron and Asqalan to the west. And Imam bin Hajar al-Asqalani calls himself Maqdisi because he comes from Asqalan, which is part of Baitulmaqdis.
Yes.
And Yafa and Ramla, Lud, and even it has territorial water. Imam al-Maqdisi mentions it's 12 miles into the sea, the Mediterranean Sea.
Really?
So it's the region. Not many Muslims would know this today, but it's very well established within Islamic geographers and historians, and even early Muslim scholars and tabi'een were very well aware of it. And one example is Abu Ubaidah, Amr ibn al-Jarrah, the companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He knew it is west of the river Jordan, so he says to the Sahaba, bury me west of the river Jordan in Al-Ard al-Muqaddasa, in the land of Baitulmaqdis. And Abu Bakr told Khalid ibn al-Walid, hurry to your brothers in Ash-Sham. For one village in Baitulmaqdis is better to me than half of Iraq, or a great province in Iraq. So the concept, the Quranic concept, is Al-Ard al-Muqaddasa. The prophetic concept is Baitulmaqdis, or the region Ardu Baitulmaqdis. And the geographers and the Mufassirin in the early Muslim period were very well aware of these divisions.
And set out for me why Baitulmaqdis is blessed. Like, what are the narrations that we know from the Quran and Sunnah, which set out the for blessed to be good. On the last show, we talked a little bit about this, and we said that in many ways we are used to Mecca and Medina, but we know less about the importance of Baitulmaqdis. So just set that out for us, please.
Yes, within Islam, there's different terminologies that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has established for these places.
Yes.
So Mecca, Allah, and Medina, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used the concept of haram.
Okay.
And the concept of haram is a sanctuary where within this precinct, no fighting, no cutting of trees, no transgression. It is a place of safety, and it's a sanctuary in a sense. So even for animals, you're not allowed to hunt, you're not allowed to... so this is the concept of haram. Baitulmaqdis is not a haram. So it's a very different concept. The Quran never calls, or Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam uses the concept of holiness or muqaddas for Mecca and Medina. But the Quran uses this for Baitulmaqdis. And we talked about a little about the meaning of muqaddas. It has two meanings. One is purified, and the second is mubarak, which is blessed. So the concept of mutahhar, it may be desecrated, but it will be purified. And we talked about this in the sense of that desecration of injustices within this land, and it will continuously be purified. And we gave the examples of from ancient history all the way to the Crusades and to the Mughals and into the current Zionist state, and also in the future, the example of Dajjal and Ya'juj and Ma'juj. So this is where Baitulmaqdis, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about it as the land of ribat and jihad until the day of judgment. So it's the testing land for the ummah. It's when the ummah falls, Baitulmaqdis is what, at the time of Salah ad-Din, it's what brought the ummah back up again. And I think this is something that today the ummah needs. And I think Baitulmaqdis is doing that. Particularly, you see how not just Muslims, but the whole world is rallying against the injustice that is happening there. There's maybe injustices more in other parts of the world, like in Sudan or in Eastern Turkestan or in Kashmir. But this is a place where if you end the injustice here, it will be reflected and it will have implications across the whole of the world. And if you bring peace in this land, you will be able to bring it across the whole world, inshallah.
Inshallah. So you set out 5 ways by which the Sahaba made Baitulmaqdis practical in their lives, and how we should emulate the Sahaba. So let's go through each one one by one. So let's start with the first way by which we recalibrate, I suppose, our way of thinking, such that this land becomes closer to our hearts and our minds.
So the first one is, to put this within the context, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, the best example for you is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So he's the role model. And looking at the way Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam connected the Sahaba to Baitulmaqdis should be actually a very important lesson for us. If it was important for Rasulullah, if it was important for the Sahaba, then automatically it should be important for us. And how Rasulullah connected the Sahaba to Baitulmaqdis then becomes to us the roadmap for us connecting ourselves to Baitulmaqdis. So from day one, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't come with a new religion. So this is an important context. Rasulullah was the continuation of the message that came before him, the message of Isa, the message of Zakaria, the message of Musa, the message of Ibrahim, and going all the way back to Adam alayhi salam. And the Sharia may be different, but the main foundation are all the same. So in terms of Hajj, fasting, And the Quran makes clearly that Muhammad didn't start this. This is Inna Dina and Allah Islam. Indeed, to Allah, religion is only Islam. How they were deviated later on is something else. But starting with when Rasulullah immediately after the first command, read, Iqra, the second command was to pray. Because to make that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know that Rasulullah used to pray in the morning and in the evening. Plus, as in the second chapter revealed to Rasulullah Muzammil, stand up and pray all of the night except for a little part, tahajjud. And the Qibla, as Ibn Abbas says in an authentic narration in Musnad Ahmad, Rasulullah from day one, his Qibla was towards Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, towards Baitulmaqdis. Yeah. So that connection, so Rasulullah would stand up in prayer from the day he becomes a prophet, and he prays towards the Qibla of the prophets. So he's praying towards Baitulmaqdis. And that created a spiritual bond between Rasulullah and Ibn Ishaq in the Seerah. He says immediately after Rasulullah, after he would teach, after someone would become Muslim, the first thing he would teach them is Salah. So that connection with Allah, and Salah is extremely important in the connection between the person and their Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his creator. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam immediately creates a connection with Baitulmaqdis through it being the first Qibla. And you have the Sahaba, Abu Bakr, Ali, Khadija, Zayd, and all the Sahaba that Arqam are becoming Muslims and praying towards Baitulmaqdis. And this is something amazing, that while the Kaaba was desecrated with hundreds of idols, Baitulmaqdis was a place purified from shirk at that time. So this was the idea of establishing Tawheed in their hearts at that moment, because praying towards the Kaaba at that moment would be surrounded by idols. It would confuse the new Muslims to this, or at least the perception of others towards them. So praying away from that, and Rasulullah would choose a place. If he would pray with the Kaaba in between, he would come to a place where there was no idols in between, directly to the Kaaba, and the actual ultimate Qibla is Baitulmaqdis. What this did to the Sahaba is it created a spiritual bond between them and Baitulmaqdis. That the day Umar ibn Khattab accepts Islam, and Al-Arqam narrates this hadith in Al-Mustadrak by Al-Hakim, he says when Umar accepts Islam, and he was the 40th to accept Islam, one person made a difference. And the Sahaba felt the izzah, the pride of Islam. Immediately, Al-Arqam connected it to Al-Aqsa. And he comes to Rasulullah and he says, Ya Rasulullah, inni uridu Baitulmaqdis. I would like to go to Baitulmaqdis. He said, for business? He says, no, I would just like to pray in Al-Aqsa. And this, I think, spiritual connection is something that we need to revive in our life today. The Qibla today is the Kaaba, but we know that our Salah came through Baitulmaqdis, the 5 daily prayers during the night journey. Yeah. And the ascension of Rasulullah was from Al-Aqsa. And our Salah should be an ascension, As-Salatu Mi'rajul Mu'min. So in a sense, in our Salah, Baitulmaqdis, we need to remember Baitulmaqdis. And a way to do this is to include in our ibadah every day Baitulmaqdis through a dua. Really? And I think this dua is, whether in our sujood or after we finish our salah or just before we say salam, a dua like this: Allahumma rzuqna salatan fil masjid al-Aqsa wa huwa hurrun aziz. Ya Allah, grant us a prayer in Al-Aqsa free from occupation. And I think having this as a routine would revive Al-Aqsa in our life, like it was for the Sahaba, praying towards Al-Aqsa every day. That spiritual bond that was created, we can do that through our prayer by making that dua. So, and this is building on something Rasulullah says within the framework of our discussion, قَلِيلٌ دَائِمْ خَيْرٌ مِنْ كَثِيرٍ مُنْقَطَعٍ. It has to be continuous. Your action being continuous is better than something one-off and being, people today are associating themselves with Baitulmaqdis with one-off things. So when today something happens in Al-Aqsa, people might stand up and be angry, but then when it dies off, they'll forget about it. The idea is to have something continuous. So having this as part of your daily dua, I think will get you closer spiritually to Baitulmaqdis.
I think it's a fascinating thing that you raised, and in fact, if you can give us that dua, we can put it on the screen, as well as in the show notes, so that everyone can memorize it,
inshallah,
and place it. So you mentioned there that we can read that in our sujood, we can read that just before we give salam, and as long as it's in Arabic, that's perfectly fine for our salah. Just a fiqh point for you.
In terms of fiqh, if you are a Hanafi, then it is you make it at the end before you give your salam. But if you are a Shafi'i or a Maliki or a Hanbali, in your sujood, you can make this this dua. So in the terms of the fiqh, some of the Hanafi scholars have an issue of adding anything within the salah. But within the other madhab, Rasulullah says the closest you are to Allah is in your sujood. So any dua in your sujood is something that takes you, that ascension we talked about is at another level. And this dua in particular is actually for you, Al-Aqsa and the Ummah. So, Ya Allah, grant us a prayer in Al-Aqsa free from occupation, is that the Ummah is going to wake up, liberate Al-Aqsa, and Allah will give you a long life to see that and pray in it after it's liberated. And I think that putting yourself, the Ummah and Al-Aqsa in one dua, and saying this on a daily basis, whether in your sujood or in your salah, I think it would do to us what it did to the Sahaba praying towards Al-Aqsa every day.
And that's brilliant. Second point, how do we make Al-Aqsa central to our practical lives? Or make Baitulmaqdis central to our practical lives?
The way we look at the way Rasulullah connected the Sahaba to Baitulmaqdis, and actually this was through Quranic revelation. A third of the Quran today are stories of prophets, the prophets of Islam. And I keep repeating this because we need to, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to us that we as believers do not distinguish between His, لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله. We do not distinguish between the messengers of Allah. So we are the true inheritors of Abraham and Moses and Jesus, peace be upon them all, and Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So in this sense, the Quran is full of the stories of these prophets, and these prophets are the prophets of Islam, and they came with the message of Islam. And you see all the prophets of God have come with the same message, Tawheed, and calling people to a better, to the betterment of this life and the hereafter. And you see these stories, half of the Quran in Mecca was stories of these prophets. And it had many reasons. It was one, giving Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, giving him support that what you're going through, your brothers, the prophets have gone through before you. And another dimension, it linked the Sahaba to the land of the prophets, which is Baitulmaqdis. Starting with Adam alayhi salam coming to the story of Abraham, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Anbiya, which is a Meccan chapter, and we saved him and Lut to the land which we have blessed for all the worlds. And this barakah of this land, going back to the Quranic terminology, the land of barakah, the barakah is not just for the Muslims. The barakah is not just for humans. It even goes beyond to the most inclusive Quranic terminology, lil alameen, for all the worlds. So you see the story of Ibrahim. This was land of hope for him. like it was a land of hope for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam after he has gone through the year of sorrow and Ta'if and others. On the other side, you have the story of Lut. You have the story of Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, and his disciples. You have the story of Maryam. You have the story of Zakaria and Yahya. You have the story of Sulaiman and Dawood. You have the story of Ishaq and Ismail and Yaqub. And all of this, the geography of this, is the land of Baitulmaqdis. So whenever you are reading these stories of the prophets, it is making that connection. So imagine Abu Bakr, radiallahu anh, or Umar, or Al-Arqam, or Ali, or Uthman, or standing up in prayer, facing Baitulmaqdis, reciting the story of Maryam. وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ Maryam. And the Quran uses specific Quran geographical terminology. مكانا شرقية, an easternly place. And when the Muslims rebuilt Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, the mihrab of Maryam is exactly in the most easternly corner of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, and they call the gates of the mihrab of Maryam. And then you have the gate, and this is reviving how the Quran, when the Tabi'een and the Sahaba rebuilt Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa on the original foundations that date back to the time of Adam alayhi salam. And this is the way the Quran was connecting the Sahaba to Baitulmaqdis. So was Rasulullah through the hadith. And one hadith, Abu Dhar, who was one of the first Muslims, he comes to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his story of his Islam is incredible. He doesn't eat anything for 30 days, and all he drinks is Zamzam water. And he comes to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, accepts Islam, and he says to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's amazed by the barakah of Zamzam, and he says to him, what is the first masjid on earth? And he says, Al-Masjid Al-Haram, the Kaaba. He says, what is the second mosque on earth? Why would he ask this? Because it was his Qibla. And he says, Al-Aqsa, Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. He says, how long between Al-Aqsa and the Kaaba? And he says, 40 years. And Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani and Ibn Hisham al-Ansari and most of the Muslim scholars say the building of the Kaaba comes way before Ibrahim alayhi salam, from the first human, because Allah says in Surah Al-Imran verse 96, إِنَّ أَوَّلَ بَيْتٍ وُضِعَ لِلنَّاسِ, the first structure, the first house of worship for humanity is the Kaaba. And the hadith here says the second is Al-Aqsa, and between them 40 years. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, the great muhaddith, says this is from the time of Adam alayhi salam. Both these two centers of Tawheed.
Yeah.
So way before the children of Israel, way before the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, way before Isa alayhi salam, way before Musa alayhi salam, way before Ibrahim, these are the two centers of Tawheed on earth. And this is the inheritance of the believers. So you have the stories of the prophets, you have the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam connecting the Sahaba to this land. And this religious connection for us today, so we said the first spiritual connection is we can revive it through dua. The religious connection, we can revive this through understanding why is Al-Aqsa and Baitulmaqdis and the land of Barakah important to me as a Muslim today. And to do this, I think every Muslim needs to read something on a daily basis that will reconnect them, like Rasulullah connected the Sahaba to this. And I think with the month of Ramadan, we're reading the Quran. As you're reading the Quran, ponder over the geography of the Quran in one side. If you can read why it was important to the Sahaba, why the Hadith, at least read a verse of the Quran a day or a Hadith a day that connects you to Baitulmaqdis. And there is a good website that inshallah by the month of Ramadan will be launched, www.ilovealaqsa.com.
Okay.
And what it does this. The idea is to revive the importance of Al-Aqsa in our hearts through this religious connection, how Rasulullah taught the Sahaba to be connected to Baitulmaqdis. This is a way that we can read this. And an example of this is how Rasulullah every night would mention Al-Aqsa. And you might think, how is this possible? Our mother Aisha radiallahu anha says, after the night journey, Rasulullah would not sleep until he recites Surah Al-Isra. So Rasulullah does not want to forget the meeting of all the prophets together in Al-Aqsa. And this concept that Rasulullah every night mentions Al-Masjid Al-Haram and Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa should be an inspiration for every Muslim, that every night I will mention the first two centers of Tawheed, Al-Aqsa and the Kaaba, and rekindle this love for this place through the way Rasulullah connected the Sahaba to this life.
So that's the first point is a spiritual connection.
Yes.
Second point is a religious connection. The third point is a political connection. Explain
Yes.
that.
Yes, the political connection, and a lot of people have an issue with politics and Islam, but this is part of the secularization of Muslims today. But this is, you cannot separate religion or Islam from politics in any way. And although the European experience post the French Revolution tried to separate the church from politics, but that's not, in reality, that hasn't been experienced. But what is being forced is separating Islam from politics is something that we're living through today. And even within Muslim states, this is something that's being pushed, secularization, moving religion out of the equation completely. But when you see Donald Trump and you have Charles, King Charles, being the head of the church, the Church of England, or on the other side, the religious manifestation within the West, you think, why is Muslims moving religion completely out of the equation is another matter. But the Quran is full of politics. Our life is based on politics. But the example that does this in the Quran is while the Sahaba were in the most difficult stage in their da'wah, which is in the Meccan period, when Sumayyah has been martyred, when her Yasir has been martyred, when the Sahaba are being persecuted, the Quran does not come to discuss their local politics, it comes to discuss international politics. And this is a war between the Persians and the Romans or the Byzantines. And the Quran, in the first Quranic prophecy, does exactly that. What does the Quran do? Alif Lam Mim Ghulibat al-Rum fi adna al-ard. So imagine today going to the Uyghur Muslims and telling them there's a war between Russia and the West over Ukraine. They'll tell you, why are you telling me this? The Sahaba are being persecuted in Mecca, and the Quran comes down to talk about a war between two superpowers. Why does the Quran do this? It is, as the scholars, the Mufassirin have mentioned, it is to take the Muslims from this is not a local matter. Islam is an international religion, and you need to keep your eye out on what is happening. And this prepared the Sahaba for the conquest of these lands a decade or 2 decades later. And Abu Bakr, being the first Khalif, he was well aware of the weaknesses and the strength of both the Persians and Byzantines, that he managed to, within 5 years of the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, both these powers have kneeled down in front of the Muslim armies, and the Muslims have conquered these lands. But taking it a step back, the Persians have taken over all the Byzantium. They've even besieged Constantinople, Istanbul today. They've taken all of North Africa, all of Bilad al-Sham. And the Quran mentions this story when it's in relation to Baitulmaqdis. So the Quran says the Romans had been defeated where? In Adna al-Ard. And Adna al-Ard is the land of around Jericho, around the area of the Dead Sea, the lowest part on earth in terms of geology. وهم من بعد غلبهم سيغلبون. And they shall be, the Quran prophesizes that they shall be victorious within a few years. Something political analysts at that time said that is not impossible. They've lost, imagine today, Russia is invaded and every part of Russia falls with the exception of the capital city, Moscow. The Romans lost everything with the exception of their capital, the Byzantines. And everyone said this is the end of Byzantium. The Quran said no, they shall be victorious within a few years. What this did to the Sahaba, it connected them to this world politics. And Abu Bakr as-Siddiq even made a bet. At that time, betting wasn't, it was made haram in Medina, forbidden in Medina, but in the Meccan period it wasn't. So Abu Bakr made a bet that within 3 years, the Romans shall be victorious. And then he tells this to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Rasulullah said, who said 3 years? He said, Bida in Arabic is between 3 and 10. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Al-Ahtat, be a little more careful, increase the number of years and increase your wager. So Abu Bakr increases it to 9 years and he makes it from 10 camels to 100 red camels, which are the best. So imagine someone making a bet today, 100 Ferraris on a political or on a football match or whatever. What this did to the Sahaba, it made them follow the smallest details of the war between the Persians and the Byzantines, the Sassanids and the Romans. And this took this to a completely new level. And Baitulmaqdis was central to this. How can we revive this in our life today? The people in Baitulmaqdis are doing this on behalf of the Ummah. The people of Gaza are giving up this fight on behalf of Al-Aqsa, on behalf of the Ummah. So the Ummah, the least it can do is do what? Follow what is happening politically. And do not just passively follow. Turn this into action by resharing and exposing the real face of Zionism. And this, I think, is reflected in verse 7 of Surah Al-Isra. Allah says in the Quran, لِيَسُوءُ وُجُوهَكُمْ وَلِيَدْخُلُوا الْمَسْجِدِ. Before you will enter the masjid, you will disgrace their faces. So this is, we're talking about a roadmap for the liberation. And these are steps. 1, dua. 2, learning the religious importance. 3, following the politics. And being active in sharing this. And exposing the real face of Zionism today.
So let's talk about the fourth point, activism.
Yes.
How does that link to practically manifesting this love for Baitulmaqdis?
Yes. This, we're talking about the minimum standard that we should be doing on a daily basis for our connection with Baitulmaqdis.
Yes.
And I think each person needs to find a niche. How can I serve this issue within my own field of expertise? And each one needs to develop their own roadmap. And what we're talking about here is just ABC, but each one needs to develop their own way forward. And I would like to give an example for this activism from the Quran. And it's in relation to Bani Israel. And it's the story of Talut and Jalut. And the Quran mentions in Surah Al-Baqarah that a group of Bani Israel, after they were forced out of their land, they went to a prophet of theirs and they said, we would like to make jihad in the way of Allah. And the context here is Bani Israel wanting to fight in the way of God and to re-enter the Holy Land. And he says, Allah has chosen over you Talut as king, Saul, in the biblical context. They say, we will never accept him because he's not the right leader. He says, Allah has given him 2 attributes that you do not have. 1, زَادَهُ بَسْطَةً فِي الْعِلْمِ وَالْجِسْمِ. Allah has given him intellectual ability and strength in physical ability. And intellect comes well before physical strength. They don't accept, they get into an argument. Eventually, Allah brings the Ark of the Covenant carried by the angels, and that is the sign for him to be your king. It's a very detailed story. He becomes the leader of the Israelites to take them into the Holy Land. And the first thing is, this is linked to activism, is you have to have discipline. And he tells them, your first test is you are not allowed to drink water. But water is halal. No one will tell you don't drink water. He says, your test is you'll be tested by a river, and this river no one should drink from. And if you drink, you will not continue. And there are 80,000 with him. Only 300 do not drink. And you can see this level, this discipline is what is lacking today. And I think this, we can translate this into each one needs to find the niche in which they are able to do this. But I think at the same time, think what self-discipline I need. And I think within this context, maybe boycott is something that, active boycott is something that will give us that self-discipline, right, for us to be able to, something I will not take as part of my self-discipline towards on the road to Baitulmaqdis.
So your final point, your final way by which we practically manifest Baitulmaqdis in our lives is preparing a gift. Yes. Explain that to me, please.
This is in a context where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is responding to a gift he receives in his masjid. A companion from Baitulmaqdis, his name is Tamim bin Aus al-Dari from Khalil, from Hebron. He comes to Medina, he's a priest, he accepts Islam, and he brings two gifts to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One, he builds the first mimbar for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his masjid. The second is he put latrines in the mosque of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and particularly at night when it was dark, now you have light in the masjid. So within this context, Maymuna, a female companion, comes to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and she tells him, Ya Rasulullah, give us a fatwa about Baitulmaqdis. And he says, it is the land of raising and gathering. Go and pray in it. For one prayer in Baitulmaqdis is equal to 1,000 elsewhere. Immediately, Maymuna, a female freed slave, a companion, she says, what if one cannot go there? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam doesn't just say, make dua or just learn. He says, turn this into action. And he says, send the gift. And he puts the gift in the context of put light, send the gift of oil to lighten its latrines. For the one that sends a gift will get the same reward as praying in it. So you can see that context, that send a gift, it will be as if you are praying in it. And this is something that easily can be done by every Muslim today. I think a small gift today to Al-Aqsa, to keep Al-Aqsa alive, but I think a gift for the liberation of Al-Aqsa is something that we need to ponder over.
It's been a really fascinating conversation, and we need to internalize and make sure we practice what you mentioned to practically manifest Al-Aqsa in our lives. So Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for your time.
Jazakallah khair. And I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we can act upon these points and the liberation will then become closer, and that we can pray in Al-Aqsa free from occupation.
Ameen. Ameen Ya Rab. Jazakallah khair. Please remember to subscribe to our social media and YouTube channels, and head over to our website thinkingmuslim.com to sign up to my weekly newsletter. Jazakallah khair.